G'day, welcome back to the channel. I want to follow up on a query I sent to the FAA this week about remote ID, standard remote ID. I sent this message to them through the form on their website. So I had a tracking number, they had to respond. They couldn't ignore this query like they did my previous email. So here is what I said to them. I said, "Dear Sir, Madam, can you please advise whether this craft should be supplied with standard remote ID out of the box if it was made after 16th of September 2023. And I point to the FMS Super Easy. I link to that product page. That's a ready-to-fly model. It comes with the transmitter, the radio, the battery, the craft itself. In fact, the only thing that they recommend you might want to buy to make it a complete package is a simulator, but that's not necessary in order to fly the craft. So it doesn't qualify for the homemade exemption. That would have meant it doesn't need standard remote ID at this point in time. So I wanted them to say yes or no. Pretty simple question, very simple answer. And I went on to say, I note no mention of standard remote ID in the description, but my interpretation of the rule suggests that it is now a requirement for such craft to be fitted with standard remote ID broadcast systems. So that was it. That was my query. I think even the tea lady could have answered this one. I wasn't optimistic that I'd get a sensible response, and I wasn't disappointed, because here's what they said. But to their credit, they did respond, and they responded within their prescribed window of 1 to 2 working days. But here is what that response says. The FAA said to me, as of 16th September 2022, drone manufacturers must comply with the remote ID requirements specified for them. Well, I'd kind of said that in my query, didn't I? I pointed out I was aware of that. So why are they sending it back to me? Well, I wanted them to make an interpretation. I wanted them to decide, does this particular craft need standard remote ID? It wasn't a hard question, but so far, no response. Then they go on to say, as of 16th September 2023, operators must comply with the remote ID rule. You can confirm if your drone has an FAA approved declaration of compliance here. And they link off to the list of declared compliant craft. So, as I expected, they completely dodged the question. They did not tell me whether the craft I linked to was compliant or not. They wouldn't. They didn't. They didn't tell me whether it should have standard remote ID. I know it's not compliant, but they didn't tell me whether it should have standard remote ID, which is the question I was asking. They didn't answer it. They just quoted what I'd told them and then a little bit more, and pointed me at a list of craft which have been self-declared as compliant. No answer to my question whatsoever. And this kind of leaves me thinking that the FAA themselves don't really care. They don't care about standard remote ID. It wasn't their idea. It was the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense. It was their idea. So the FAA is basically saying, we've done what you asked and that's it. We're not doing any more. You guys sort it out for yourselves. So at this stage, we do not have to worry about standard remote ID in the USA. The FAA is not enforcing it. They said they'd put off the enforcement date from 16th September to 16th of December. The reality is they will not be, I'm pretty sure they will not be enforcing standard remote ID. And do you know why? Because there's nothing to enforce. If we look carefully at it, this is a manufacturer's obligation, a manufacturer's responsibility. So Horizon Hobby can continue to sell that FMS Super Easy ready-to-fly bundle, even if it was made yesterday, because it's not Horizon Hobby's responsibility. It's not their liability. They're doing nothing wrong by selling a non-compliant piece of kit. The burden falls on the manufacturer, who is FMS in China, and China's outside the US jurisdiction. This rule only applies to the USA. So companies in China can continue to make non-compliant equipment. That equipment can be imported into the USA and it can be used. And the FAA and DHS and DOD can just hum into the breeze, because there's nothing they can do about it. There's no rule that prohibits the use of non-compliant equipment at this time. There's no rule that prohibits the sale of non-compliant equipment at this time. So they're all free to do what they want. This first part of the rule is just a joke. The only people impacted by this are US-based manufacturers. Manufacturers have a presence in the USA and are making stuff. Now, DJI, they are complying with the first part of the rule because they have a US presence. The DJI have a registered company in the USA. They have to do that to do business there. So they could be fined or whatever by the FAA. But FMS, if they don't have, I don't know if they have a US presence or not, I shouldn't think they do, but any other little Chinese manufacturer, they don't give a damn. Why should they? It's not like the FAA are going to come knocking on their door in Shenzhen, is it? So this is the type of rule that bureaucrats make. It is a nonsensical rule because it cannot and will not be enforced in 98% of situations. Why waste all that time and effort to make a rule that you can't enforce? Makes no sense, because 98% of all the drone and model aircraft production in the world is in China, not in the USA. The only companies that are adversely affected by this are US companies. It's an anti-American bill. It's make America weak again, because you're discriminating against US manufacturers and in favor of any other country in the world because they don't have to comply with your rules. This is crazy. Now, the next big step, as they say here, is the 16th of September 2023, because that's when the burden of responsibility, the liability shifts from a manufacturer to the person flying the drone or the RC model. At that stage, you may see some enforcement, because the FAA is not going to spend millions of dollars trying to prosecute a small trader in Shenzhen, but they might feel like walking around fields and just issuing summary fines for anyone they find who isn't complying with their responsibility to have remote ID on their model as of 16th September 2023, this year. It'll be very interesting to see what happens there. My belief is that we should push back so hard that that never happens. It never happens. We've already proven that the first part of the remote ID rule is a joke, a sham. It's not going to be enforced. So maybe we can convince them that the second part is equally stupid and pointless. We have to do something. We have to do something. Anyway, I want to keep this video short. Wanted to share that with you. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. Thank you to channel members that allow me to continue to support, promote, and protect the hobby for everybody, especially future generations. You're all heroes. I thank you very much. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want more, subscribe. Share it around your socials, because we need to keep things going. I will be continuing the pressure on these US government agencies and regulators all over the world in every country, because they're all making the same mistakes. I may contact DHS and DOD to see whether they're happy that the FAA has chosen not to enforce this rule, their own rule. And let's see what they have to say. I'm sure they'll ignore me, but one can only try. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye for now.
Overregulation is like a tumor. It's killing our hobby. It must be terminated. Now!